Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Damage Report on lockdown. And I am coming to you following a couple of technical issues right up until the time of broadcast, which is why we're a couple of minutes late. But thank you, everybody, for frantically refreshing for a few minutes. We are, in fact, here now. Myself and Michael Shore, who joins us once again on the show. How's it going, Michael?
Right, with apparently resolution and worse lighting, but it's good to be on the show, Johnny.
If it works, it works. If people can hear us, that's great. Sometimes they can't. If they can see us, that's great. Sometimes they can't. And we're really just hoping that our internet connections will work because both of us had massive problems in the last hour.
That's exactly right.
Everybody who's already coming to the chat, thank you very much for doing that. As always, please hit the like button so that more people will get notifications about this stream. We get a lot that we're going to be talking about through the course of today. What I'm alluding to in the title there is Fox News, not in general going back to lying about coronavirus. They never took a pause on that. But specifically, they are now minimizing the number of deaths that have already happened and attempting to convince their audience to ignore the numbers as they continue to go up. We're going to have a number of different pieces of evidence in that area. A bit after that, we've got a Republican congressman out with a new ad that some are saying seems a little bit racist. We're going to evaluate that. Updates on insulin pricing during the pandemic. What regulation changes in slaughter plants might have to do with the next pandemic. And at the end of the show, Michael and I are going to be having a little bit of a conversation about the new dynamics of the Democratic primary and how the general election is likely to go if Joe Biden is, in fact, the nominee, which is looking like today he will be. So that's how we're going to be closing things off. If you want to hear that, stick around for the rest of the show. Throughout, as always, we're going to be reading your comments, your super chats, as well as any tweets you send to hashtag TDR Live. We've got an awesome team of producers who are going to be tracking that and putting it together for me so that I'm a little bit less frantic during the show than I have been the past couple weeks when I was doing that myself. So anything we need to get to before we launch on the story, Michael?
No, I'm eager. Now that we've gotten all this internet crap done, happy to proceed.
Although, actually, we do. I just want to mention, we've done videos on the last two unemployment reports, and it was 6.6 again this last week, which is just incredible. Right. I mean, the first week seemed like a disaster. It was record-breaking, and that now looks sort of quaint in comparison to the total numbers of the past 3 weeks.
Right. I mean, and the total unemployment, the number of people that in the American workforce are out of work right now, it's a staggering number. And, I mean, it's also to be expected. It isn't because somebody dropped the ball on the economy necessarily, but certainly they're dropping the ball on the safety net right now. And that's gonna create further problems going forward, too.
Carol Shea, I saw your message. Thank you for that. And I will say that I think it's really interesting that this is sort of me projecting maybe, but I look at those numbers week by week, and I think this is even more reason why we need more stimulus specifically targeted at those who are losing their jobs, are at risk of losing their jobs, didn't even have jobs before this thing hit, are homeless, are undocumented, all of those different groups. But I have a feeling that when these numbers hit, that those who are in a position to do something about this, in particular, Donald Trump and them, this is probably for them just a reason to end the social distancing and attempt to go back to normal, regardless of what the human cost might be for that. I mean, the fact that over the past couple of weeks, weirdly, when millions are filing for unemployment, that news is always greeted by the stock market going up, which is sort of weird. Maybe that makes maybe there's a little bit less pressure on them to want to restart things because that's the part of the economy that they care about. But from my point of view, I think about the ever-increasing number of millions of Americans who are desperately in need of assistance. In any event, let's see. We've got a couple of Oh, sorry. What were you saying, Michael?
I'm frozen on the stream to myself right now, but I just confirm you could hear me.
I can now. You were in fact frozen, so that's gonna be fun. But we're gonna do our best, okay? This is what the lockdown is like. Everyone is dealing with the fact that video chat services aren't as good as they should be in 2020, and everyone's on the internet right now, so it is slow.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, like I said, everyone, please hit the like button. It is the best way to make sure that everyone knows that this stream is in fact live. Ring the bell so you get notifications in the future. And with that, why don't we jump into the news? Okay. As of this morning, we had another horrible day in terms of the number who have died as a result of coronavirus. If we take a look at the numbers, yesterday was not quite as bad, slightly short of the all-time high of nearly 2,000, but still very high. And those 2 days are just such a 1-2 punch of a significant number of people dying, or at least that's what the professionals who report this stuff want us to believe. Others, in a position of authority in terms of media or even power in politics, don't necessarily feel the same way. Here is what Donald Trump has been saying about the numbers who have died, and more importantly, what he wants you to think about the numbers that might die.
That was a projection of, I guess, 1.5 to 2.2 million people would die if we didn't close it up. That's a lot of people. So if we do a number that's tremendously smaller than that, now if we did close it up, the numbers got to 100 to 220 million people. So if we can stay substantially under the 100, which was the original projection, I think we all did a very good job, even though it's a lot of people.
Okay, so what we have there is him saying, and I think Mehdi-Hassan pointed out that they always want to anchor you to that original projection, not to cause you to take this seriously and be willing to perhaps sacrifice some personal mobility and all that in the near future, but to say that if literally anything other than that happens, we'll have done a great job. And he's not just implying that, he's directly saying that over and over. And so they're now saying it might be something like 60,000, and they're already pitching that as some sort of great victory, which I find to be ominous, honestly, Michael.
Yeah, well, the insurance to that would have been the notion that you had Fauci and the doctors out there saying these things, these numbers, confirming these numbers, forecasting them. You had the medical community sort of saying that these are numbers that we're forecasting. So you knew that anything that came in under those numbers was going to be a Trump victory dance. So I'm not surprised we're going to get that. The question is anybody going to be looking at the way this White House handled this with anything but scorn once this is all said and done? Not necessarily because of, that they were responsible for every death, but the lack of preparedness and the not getting the straight talk, and then having the medical community challenge them every day. And then you look at his poll numbers. Even when they bumped, they didn't bump very much. The president, and I think we might have talked about this last time, a U.S. president in a time of crisis should see his numbers go through the roof. They have for terrible presidents and terrible situations, and they didn't go through the roof here. They always come back to earth, but they didn't go through the roof here. So I do think that you have people looking at this with a great deal of skepticism, even though we know what the president's doing here.
Exactly. And, he's going to get an assist, which we're going to go through a number of different media figures who are attempting in one way or another, and the tactics do vary, to prep people to not be that concerned, even if the number does continue to significantly rise. But as someone pointed out in the chat, I do want to at least acknowledge that he's talking about original projections there, and he's referring to some of the original models, which are obviously going to be somewhat loose. But let's also bear in mind a projection that he made not too many weeks ago when he said the number of cases is only 15 and soon it'll be close to 0. Bear in mind the number of cases wasn't 15 when he said that, it was something like 60 to 70, but he projected we'd be at 0 a month ago. So the projections have changed fast.
It was going to wash through.
It was going to wash through. Just everyone be calm. It'll go away. It'll go away. Much like a bear that is mauling us right now. Right. So look, it's not just Trump. He's going to say what he's going to say. But Fox News especially, they have, in one form or another, been doing everything they can to hamper the ability of our country to deal with coronavirus from the very beginning. Right now, what they're doing is a 1-2 punch of implying that, agreeing with Trump, that anything short of 100,000 or 1 million deaths is going to be some sort of big victory, but especially don't even trust the numbers that you're seeing. And, we've been tracking this a couple times now. It started off with Diamond and Silk last week saying the numbers are just made up. They're just making up fake numbers. And that was just Fox Nation. That was only the online component of the biggest media company in the country. So we shouldn't be too concerned about that. But then it rapidly spread over the past few days to Brit Hume and others. And now, in fact, it's hit the straight news anchors. Take a look at Harris Faulkner here.
The federal government now is classifying all COVID-19 patient deaths as such, regardless of whether any other underlying health issues were a factor. This as the death toll in the United States just topped 13,000. How many of those people had other health risks at play, though? And maybe it wasn't, in fact, COVID-19 that caused their death.
Okay, so she's saying if they're sick with literally anything else and they die, it's being tracked as being caused by coronavirus because that's what killed them. But that bothers her because these people had underlying illnesses. Why is that being counted? Even though this is like some sort of like big realization that they've had in the past 48 hours that it's combining with other illnesses to kill people. We've known about that from the very beginning. That's not something that means we should ignore coronavirus. That's one of the reasons we've been as scared as we've been about it, because it preys on people who are susceptible to illness. Not only them, there are plenty of totally healthy young people who are getting sick and even dying as a result of this, but especially those with compromised immune systems or something else at play. They now think that if somebody with a compromised immune system catches coronavirus, dies of it, that for some reason that shouldn't be counted as a coronavirus death. I have no idea how you come to that conclusion. And again, this is not Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity. That's Harris Faulkner. She's supposed to be one of their news people, right, Michael?
Well, that's where I was going to say that what she said is as egregious as what you calling her a straight news anchor. She's someone who does drop in opinion there with some constancy. And sorry for the background noise here, but I think that that what you're seeing though is exactly what the problem with this. If all of a sudden there was something that was afflicting only the weakest among us, and it was a disease, and it was killing people who otherwise would not be dying. Maybe their life expectancy wasn't what yours is or mine is necessarily, but it wasn't. They weren't about to imminent away. Then that's a national and worldwide emergency, and that's what we're dealing with now.
Exactly. And as we were saying yesterday when this stuff was starting to go around, does anyone think that they would be like tying themselves into mental knots to excuse away these deaths if it wasn't Donald Trump or another Republican president that was in office? Whether it's their opinion people or their straight news people or straight news adjacent people, what passes for straight news on Fox News, does anyone actually think that they would be doing that? And we predicted, by the way, that this would become sort of the universal go-to position. And it in fact has, I would say faster than I would have expected, spread throughout the network and other affiliated, the online right-wingers, the right-wing writers and things like that. And I understand that Harris Faulkner probably feels like, I'm just looking at this critically, and I want to make sure that we have the most accurate information possible. Maybe that's what she's doing. But the end result of a person waking up and turning on Fox News and going through a full day of it is that they will be left with the impression that you can't trust these numbers. And so if it hits 20,000, if it hits 50,000, I mean, really, what does that even represent? Does that mean anything? And they will not think that it means anything. And so Trump, he can be a buffoon and he can bungle this thing. Maybe it'll hurt him a little bit with some slightly more critical thinking independents. I don't know. But in terms of his base, they're going to believe that it's nothing really.
Yeah, that's true. And his base, though, is the one that are the ones that this is all being addressed to. This is get out the vote in a way, right? This is to make sure that, because they know how fragile their position is as a candidacy, how by what a slim margin electorally and state-wise within the states, really popular vote within the states that they won by. They have to make sure that they get and keep every single Donald Trump voter. So they keep doing this because it's an us versus them, and we're in the us versus them era, anyway in an election year. But it's certainly in a much more pronounced way now.
Yeah. Honestly, though, the way that Harris Faulkner put it seems almost respectful compared to this. I'm going to go to one more video. Okay. As more and more people are dying from coronavirus, take a look at the way, in a just casual little chat, Sean Hannity and Bill O'Reilly talked about this.
But I want life back to normal. Can you fix that in a simple way?
Oh, man, I wish I could,
Oh, me too.
But we're making little steps. Bernie Sanders, he's gone. That's really good for everybody. The projections that you just mentioned are down to 60,000. I don't think it'll be that high. 13,000 dead now in the USA. many people who are dying both here and around the world were on their last legs anyway, and I don't want to sound callous about that.
Oh, you're going to get hold on. You're going to get hammered for that.
I mean, a simple man tells the truth.
Well,
And,
you mean people that have underlying conditions and compromised immune systems? Any virus you're saying would have.
Okay, yes. So Dr. Bill O'Reilly, who he believes the numbers will be even lower. Based on what? Nothing. He doesn't know anything. He literally knows nothing. And any infection would have finished them off because he's a doctor and he knows that they were on their last legs. Why are we freaking out about these people dying?
I also like a simple. These must be the two most complicated men in America, if in fact a simple man tells the truth.
Yes, they're quite complex. And by the way, so look, I thought about going back, and in the end, I didn't care enough to actually go back and pull quotes or anything. But the idea that if people are old and if people are sick, and especially if they're old and sick, and they're close to death anyway, honestly, just let them die. That's their approach to this. How many videos do you think they made attacking death panels under Barack Obama under the ACA? The conspiracy theory that they had. The idea that you wouldn't care about extending every life as long as possible. They were so incensed by that, fired up for literally years to attack Obama about that. Now it's like, okay, so like 14,000 older sick people died. Why are we criticizing the president over this? It's a bit of hypocrisy.
It's inconsistent, but it's also the benefit of the audience they have now, because what Donald Trump has done, and we know this, is brought a lot of people into being interested in this, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's at the voting booth, in different ways. People who were not interested in politics, who paid zero attention to it. Everything that happens, every word that's said to this audience, and not to all of them clearly, but to many of them, is new. So context and what you may have said about death panels doesn't matter, because all that these people know is what has happened since Donald Trump has risen in American politics. And so it's actually a benefit. It's a nice luxury for these people to have. But of course, we're here to say why it's so dangerous and why it is such an incredible lack of integrity as well. And that's the big part of it. But it really is an amazing dynamic that you're speaking to people who know nothing about history very often in history. And that's an important advantage.
Yeah, love, by the way, also that after all that we found out about Bill O'Reilly, him being driven effectively out of show business as a result of it, Sean Hannity still has him on. Like, he's still buddies. What does it matter if he ruined women's careers, was a predator for a number of years? Let's chat, buddy. Let's talk about how it's not a problem that thousands are dying literally every day. And by the way, while Bill O'Reilly and to a lesser extent there Sean Hannity are just absolutely horrendous in the way that they're addressing this. As I alluded to earlier, it is coming in a number of different forms. So let's see, you have Tucker Carlson every night is doing shows about how it's not as bad as we thought it might be. And that, by the way, again, you have to understand context. He's not saying that and thus saying, and thank you to all of the responsible medical professionals who advocated for social distancing and staying at home. It looks like it's working. He's saying this was all a waste. We shouldn't have done it. We should start up the economy. And it's like we said at the very beginning, the goal of all of these measures will be hopefully to be so successful that we will be attacked as having over responded effectively. And we're seeing that already. Even though he said those two shows where he has made it effectively, this isn't that bad, have been the 2 days with the most deaths nationwide from coronavirus. I don't know what today is going to look like. I hope that it plummets. But if it's high, I don't anticipate that he's going to backtrack off of this narrative.
Right. And I forget who it was or if it was somebody talking about this, so I don't have the specifics on this, but someone was talking about how the Democrats want people out of work to make it look like the Trump economy is bad, and they want more people to die to make it look like Trump didn't do enough, which is obviously not true for 99.999% of people who are Democrats or otherwise who are Americans. The other part that I think you should also notice is Tucker Carlson is the person who has Bill O'Reilly's time slot. So there's a great consistency across the grid at Fox.
That is true, and the consistency goes even further. Laura Ingram's show last night was flawed projections sparked panic, and so again, we should not have locked everything down. It was a big waste, and that was last night. This morning, Brian Kilmeade took a scornful tone as he talked about the projections, saying, quote, "The fact is, when somebody says 200,000 people die, oops, I mean 60,000, and it's not going to be right away, it's going to be in August. That's how good we are doing and how off the models were. You have to wonder, as much as social distancing is working, I wonder if the economists are going to get in that room and say we have to stand up this economy in some way before we're not going to be able to stand up when this is all said and done." So, really fast, because we have a follow-up immediately to that, but so he says, oops, it's only 60,000. That's nothing. I mean, so we lose like a Vietnam of American citizens. Like, who cares about that? Acknowledges the social distancing is working and potentially is the cause for the numbers being revised down, and says, but even so, let's let some economists in. Even though the economists are saying that you will do devastating damage to the economy if you send people back to work and many more people die. Thankfully, really fast, in response to that, Steve Doocy says, right, but Brian, it's still 60,000 people, which is a staggering number. So he's, as always, the voice of reason there. We'll see if he's able to maintain that in the coming weeks. Michael, looks like we lost you for a brief second. Did you hear that from Steve Doocy?
I heard all about Steve. I mean, I heard everything you just said. I don't know why I was lost, but yeah, I mean, and it's whatever comparisons you want to make. If you want to make latter-day comparisons, you say 17 9/11s. You can just keep going and putting it into the vernacular of today, and it's just as astonishing. I mean, thank God for Steve Doocy, but he'll probably be fired.
I think he'll probably change his tune. He does occasionally. Him and Brian Kilmeade will occasionally say something sort of reasonable, and it's a trap to give them credit because it almost always is an outlier that won't be sustained.
Can I have 12 seconds for a Steve Doocy story? When I was an NBC page, which was like 1,000 decades ago, Steve Doocy hosted out of NBC studios in New York a morning show called House Party. And it was, he had a cooking segment. It was like Martha Stewart, but it was Steve Doocy. And it was the most unbelievable. It was so dull. I couldn't stand working it. But Steve Doocy was so nice. I mean, he was unbelievably nice at that time. I haven't seen him since then, since I wore a peacock on my lapel. But I do.
We're having a bit of a connection problem there with Michael. Sorry about that, Michael. We lost a bit of the Steve Doocy story.
All right, you can move on.
Okay. Well, I like the behind the scenes information to know that he's a nice guy, and he does generally like by the standard that is set at Fox News, he seems like a relatively nice guy. He's not one of the most unrepentant a-holes in the business like Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson.
No, he's lost his credibility with me. I'm just hoping a glimmer of that person's there. But no, he's totally irresponsible. He doesn't interject enough like he did today. And there are many more times that he should.
And I want to say one other thing about this, because the saying that the numbers are made up, obviously, I hate that they're doing that. I hate how just everyday and normalized spreading, baseless conspiracy theories have become, even for the most well-known, most watched, highest paid people in media. But the argument they're making there that if only 60,000 people die, then it will have been a waste to have shut down the economy. That bothers me because it's not like we haven't gone to great lengths and spent tons of money to avoid loss of life in other areas. You made the reference to 9/11, that this is potentially going to be many times over 9/11. So when 9/11 happened, we lost thousands of American lives. And if we assume that the politicians in their response to it were being honest, which I don't assume, but if we do assume it, all of the actions they took that they said were designed to stop that from happening again, how many years of war did we launch? How many trillions of dollars did we spend? How many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of civilians abroad had to die because we wanted to stop 3,000 Americans from dying in another 9/11? So we were willing to do all of that and continue to, by the way. We're still at war in multiple countries as a result of it. That is stretched for many people watching the show. That's been their entire life, the response to 9/11. But we've shut down the economy for less than a month now, and Fox News can't wait to get things started. This is unacceptable. Decades of war, trillions of dollars spent, that's okay if it hypothetically saves American lives, but to definitely save far, far more American lives, I mean, we can't have the NASDAQ go down. That's not acceptable. I'm heavily invested. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
And the other, I mean, just on that quickly, John, is that, had we not shut down the economy, had we not shut it all down, it's obvious what would have happened. We have doctors telling us we're saving lives every day because of it. So it's ridiculous. And that the inverse is always something you have to look at.
Yeah. And by the way, I saw someone mentioned in the comments, but there are, news broke this morning that the federal support is imminently ending for coronavirus testing sites, the public ones, as the pandemic peak nears. And look, I hope that it is the peak. I mean, we're projecting at this point. It's not like we called up the pandemic and asked and it was like, yeah, we're going to peak around Saturday. We hope that if they open things back up, that we won't have, we won't double dip into it. But the only way we'll know.
But if it's the peak in New York, if it's peak in California and Louisiana and Illinois, but it's not the peak in South Dakota, it's not the peak in Iowa, it's not the peak in other states, and it could just go right back up. I mean, there's no uniformity of how we're dealing with this other than on a federal level and with banking, et cetera, and that's not even uniform. But the notion that just because it goes down in the places that are quote unquote important, those aren't the only important places. A, and B, it hasn't even begun to go up on a curve in some of these other states.
Yeah, let alone in Wisconsin, we can expect that in 10 to 14 days, we'll probably see a massive increase in numbers because they went ahead with the voting. Yeah, we don't have any better medicine against it, and it's not like its power, its vigor wanes with the phases of the moon. It's every bit the disease it was 2 weeks ago. It's just that people are getting kind of frustrated and a little bit bored, I think. Okay, now really fast, I do want to go through some of the super chats because you all in the chat have been incredibly supportive. Luck Dragon says, it amazes me how Stephen Colbert asks more intuitive and coherent questions towards Bernie than corporate media spouts. Yes, I did see a little bit of that interview already. And, look, I obviously disagree with Stephen Colbert on a number of things, but I like his interviewing style. Rare Find It says, any chance you'll pick up Persona 5 Royal out now? No need to play the other games. It's really, really good. I'm beginning to think that Rare Find It is a dev for Persona 5. I haven't played one of the Persona games. Is that the one where you take photos of ghosts, I think? It's not impossible. I might, but I am playing Animal Crossing. Sabrina Houston asks if I have an opinion on Howie Hawkins or the Green Party. No, I have not followed, at least recently, Howie Hawkins, but feel free to chat about him. And thank you for the super chat. Derluke says, Michael would not freeze if he had a Montreal Canadiens cap. Go Habs. Is that what they're called?
Well, it's great because I couldn't understand any of what that person with the game and dev and all of that meant. And so now that I'm not even going to tell you what Habs. So,
I mean, I think they might secretly be a developer.
I know what it means. And by the way, my second favorite team. So
that's true.
Montreal Canadiens hockey camp when I was 9 years old.
Wow. Darren Nichols, thank you for your super chat. John O'Shea says, happy birthday, John. What do you think Biden needs to do to win over progressives? What do you think he will do? I don't have much hope right now. Well, Michael and I are going to have a talk about that to close out the show, so stay tuned. Susan Chenoweth says, I think that 6.6 million is the maximum number the system can handle because I'm still waiting to hear back from them. Freelancer. Yeah, that's the thing. That's, as you point out, that's the number who have gotten through the system. That's not the number of people who are unemployed or will be unemployed soon. Mrs. Whitelock says, in Bakersfield, California, Grimway Farms and Samco have donated food to Dignity Health hospitals, and the hospitals plan to sell it to medical staff. That doesn't seem okay.
No, it doesn't.
I like the donation part. Why are they selling things that were donated to them? John Chavez says, I need a flippin' haircut. Yeah, you and me both. I need to work on that. George and Terraform, thank you for your super chat. Wow, your hair is getting long there, Michael.
All over the place. Yeah, that's why we got the cap on.
Terraform is wrecked. Thank you for that. And Zane as well. Zane also said this pandemic is never going unless we stay home. And yeah, so Zane is one of the good people who is willing to listen to the advice of medical professionals. So thank you for that. And let's see, on the hashtag TDR Live, Gabi Morita says, yay, it's John Iadarola, the coolest half Vulcan, half beard in independent media. Also, can we make Michael Shore a regular Thursday guest on TDR Live from now on? I mean, that's going to be up to Michael. We're going to see what his schedule's like.
The answer is yes, but it's really up to Michael's internet. We're going to see what that's like, because this
That's
is
true.
a disaster. Yeah. But yes, you, Gabi, and I would love to do this with John more often.
Thank you. Gabi also says, I think every time we get up to 1,000 likes on TDR Live, then John Iadarola's pupper should make a guest appearance. Priorities. You know what? Maybe we can set that up. Let me do a refresh on this. We're at 729. If you want to see this dog, 1/10 of you need to click the like button. Let's see if you can make Gabi's day. And Unprecedented Madness says, is Michael having a bad hair day? Why is he wearing a hat indoors?
Well, I think we just saw.
It's coronavirus.
Asked and answered.
Exactly. Joe D, thank you for your super chat. Benjamin says, so do I have this correct? According to Fox's logic, if you have a pre-existing condition and get shot, it's the previous that killed you. Or at the very least, that's what should be logged.
Right. I mean, that's such a good point, though. It's just beyond to think that, if you have a sick relative and that relative is 77 years old and has, a condition, but you're, in otherwise perfect health, that, shouldn't count that person in the coronavirus numbers. It's just astonishing. It's another language.
And by the way, this is, it's obviously not one-to-one entirely similar, but there's shades of like HIV/AIDS in this. The idea that hypothetically we're going to, sorry, what were you saying, Michael?
No question. It's great that you brought it up.
Yeah, the fact that, people are going to have, compromised immune systems. Many are going to die as a result of other things that they will get that they would not have gotten, nor would they have died of, if not for the underlying cause that is the more significant problem.
And it's so nice to hear Fauci talk about the work that he did on HIV earlier. He talked about it yesterday a lot and in really moving ways in addressing how COVID is disproportionately affecting African Americans. And he's talking about stigma and underlying conditions and all of that. And what you said is so true. I'm glad you brought it up.
Thank you. Hey, Arlene, would you be able to do me a favor? Could you bring over Hilo for a second? Because we did hit 1,000 likes, so I have to give people what they requested. And then we're going to launch into the next story, which is going to be a Republicans ad, which I have a bit of a problem of. We're going to see what everyone thinks about it. Thank you. Oh, buddy. Okay. Oh, here is Hilo, everybody. He's my boy. Hey, bud, he's sleepy. He mostly sleeps until the early afternoon these days. He's on lockdown. Thank you, bud. Okay, everybody. Thank you for that. That was fun. Hope it makes you feel better. It certainly made me feel better. Okay, with that, why don't we launch into the next story, Michael?
Let's do it.
Paul Brown is a former Republican representative from Georgia who is hoping to get elected once again. And so he has an ad out. Let's take a look and see what we think of the way he's presenting himself.
In uncertain times like these, the right to defend yourself, your property, and your family could not be more important. Whether it's looting hordes from Atlanta or a tyrannical government from Washington, there are few better liberty machines than an AR-15. You see, Marxists know that Americans will never submit to socialism and place government on the throne of our hearts without a big fight. Well, I'm just not feeling like giving up my guns to the government. But I've decided to give away an AR-15 to one lucky person who signs up for email updates from paulbrown.com. Now remember, you must be at least 17 years old.
Okay, I think we've heard enough of him. So there's a lot, I think, of issues there. What has made the most headlines is that he needs his AR-15 to defend against looting hordes from Atlanta. Michael, what do you think? You've watched a lot of political ads over the years.
It does play to an audience, and the AR-15 giveaway is sadly something that has worked in terms of getting support and getting people out and getting people interested, whether it's a raffle, giveaway, pick out of a hat type of thing. In some communities in this country, it works. There should be something that the FEC does to ban this kind of. It seems like it's a little different than giving away a T-shirt. It doesn't seem that way. It is. And I think the FEC should step in on these sorts of issues because it does present people in a way that, that we don't want to be presented, especially. I mean, talk about political correctness or whatnot. This is over the top. I think a lot of people could agree to that.
Yeah, and so I love that he wants to brand it as a liberty machine, but he's so uncertain that his audience will get what he means that they have to add in the arrow pointing to it with liberty machine written on it. It's like, I mean, maybe just call it the Arrow 15 then, I guess. And Eric Wall... Sorry, go on.
To have such an ordinary name as Paul Brown and be able to come up and still get paulbrown.com, that's an achievement. So
that's true. That's true. I saw Eric Wall in the comments said, I thought a voting booth was a liberty machine. Yeah, I like that better, actually. But look, obviously, as I alluded to, the problem is the looting hordes from Atlanta. So he's running in the 9th district in Georgia, which is not Atlanta. And just random statistics so that you understand the demographics here. His district is 8% Black or African American. Atlanta is 54%. But I'm sure that that has nothing to do whatsoever with the fact that he's not talking about his district. He's talking about the scary people who might come out as a horde to steal your TV. And that's not in the ad, but in an interview afterward, he doubles down saying these people feel entitled to your TVs and your cars, and they're going to come flooding out because, again, they're not humans. They're a force of nature. They're going to come flooding out of the cities to steal the things that you and your perfect, lovely white family have worked so hard to achieve.
And that works in rural districts. I mean, that does help, shockingly, in rural districts. And so people campaign in that way. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. So I want to let him respond. So he was asked about this in an interview, and he said, only the liberal press would take that kind of position. There are a lot of white people in Atlanta as well. I feel better. I don't know about the rest of you, but I feel better. Goes on to say...
47% aren't black, apparently.
Exactly. He says, it's about black people having the means of protecting themselves just as much as white people or Hispanic people or Asian people. He also suggested that the interviewer was racist, and said that he had been a keynote speaker at any MLK Day celebration. Well, I mean, look, no claim that the racist thing you said wasn't racist would be complete without calling the person who asked you about the racism a racist themselves. That's just, the countdown starts as soon as the question goes out there. And
and just because you represent the James Earl Ray part of the MLK celebration doesn't really help you.
That's a good point. By the way, whenever one of these figures pops up, especially one who had previously been in elected office, I always do a bit of a search, see, what they made news for back in the day. And back in 2012, he had a quote that I remember actually from the time. I had not remembered him, but at the time he said, all that stuff I was taught about evolution, embryology, Big Bang Theory, all that is lies straight from the pit of hell. It's lies to try to keep me and all the folks who are taught that from understanding that they need a savior. There's a lot of scientific data that I found out as a scientist that actually show that this is really a young Earth. So he was a scientist, and he found scientific data that the Earth was 9,000 years old and had been created in 6 days. The paper is waiting for peer review.
Yeah. But and he's just to give you an idea of the kind of person that comes out of Paul Brown's district. He's running to replace Doug Collins, who's leaving that seat. So that gives you an idea of what you're dealing with there in Georgia.
Exactly, and we talked about how Kelly Loeffler, she's being challenged by Doug Collins, and she obviously has been horrendous recently. All the insider trading stuff, all that. But then it's like, so she gets replaced by Doug Collins, who's a terrible guy. Doug Collins, to replace her, has to abdicate his seat. So now maybe Paul Brown will be the next guy. It's like you want consequences for these individuals, but one of the consequences will be that they will be replaced by another in a long line of clowns.
Right. It's why so many people are saying, let's just pipe down about Kelly Loeffler. Let's just let this stuff happen. We don't want Doug Collins in the Senate.
Yeah, maybe that's true. Okay, so I know he's saying he's not racist. Maybe I'm just being a snowflake. I don't know when he talks about the looting horde. So let's do what we've been doing recently. So just really fast in the comments, type racist or not racist. Is it a dog whistle, or is it just, I should have worded it a little bit differently. I'm just curious. So racist or not racist? I'm gonna check the super chats and wait for some of those to come in. Let's see.
Unanimous.
This one probably will be. We've had others recently that were not, but you never know. I like to make sure that I'm not at a bubble. Zane says, my pain management doctor is hosting a COVID testing site. That's good. Unfortunately, it looks like it's probably going to lose federal funding soon. Skatari says, I second the doggo 1000 like thing. P.S. Happy birthday. Thank you, Skatari. I'm going to refresh this just to check. Maybe
But Johnny, today's your birthday?
No. But people like to say that. Das Gimp says, gotta donate to ensure more Michael. Thank you. Miss Kaylee, thank you for the fox. And okay, I think Gabi Morita said on TDR Live, we need to get... Okay, wait, hold on. We're seeing the... Yeah, it's mostly racist.
Mostly racist?
Some people are saying racist AF, hashtag racist for sure. All the way the hell racist. Yeah, no, I don't think I've seen anyone who says not racist. Anyway, so Gabi Morita says, we need to get TYT Starfleet to deploy a dedicated telecommunications satellite in geosynchronous orbit over Michael Shore's house. And as I was reading that, Michael had a Skype problem there very briefly, but he's back.
I don't know what's going on. Making me crazy.
At least it's happening during the super chat part. Unprecedented Madness, by the way, says, guys, I promise not all folk from Georgia are like this. Please don't judge us based on people like Brian Kemp, Doug Collins, Kelly Loeffler, and this new clown. I will try not to. Okay, and by the way, so I had seen earlier in the chat, I saw people were consoling someone named Chris about a loss, I assume related to coronavirus. I tried to find the original comment, but I was not able to. But Chris, assuming that's what it is, I'm sorry to hear about that. And with that, why don't we jump back into it? Okay. Prior to this pandemic, we still had a lot of problems with healthcare, health insurance, the price of caring for your own health in this country, and a big one that have received quite a bit of focus over the past few years was the ever-increasing price of insulin. Well, we now have some good news. Pharmaceutical manufacturer Eli Lilly said Tuesday that it will limit the out-of-pocket cost of insulin to $35 per month to offset financial hardships due to the coronavirus pandemic. The copay cap will cover the majority of the company's insulin under the Humalog injection and is open to the uninsured as well as commercially insured people, but not to Medicaid, Medicare, or Medicare Part D patients. I'm not sure exactly why that last part is there. And the thing is, like, look, taking totally just by itself, this is obviously a good thing for the people who have desperately needed financial support when it comes to paying for insulin before this, many of whom will be both in need of insulin and will have lost their jobs. But as a lot of people have pointed out when this news broke, kind of seems like they could have done this before if they're doing it now. I don't know. I don't run the company, but it seems like the jacked up price was not being driven by actual financial concerns.
Yeah, certainly they could have been better than they have been. I don't know the numbers and where it could go in terms of how low it could go. And again, I mean, the medical business is what the medical business is, and so much of it nauseates me in the way that they do their pricing. So I don't know where it would come from, but I tend to think that if they can come down to 35, they could have come down to something more manageable for many Americans previously. And what does this mean after the pandemic? What does this mean going forward? And, the other part of this is that so many of these drugs that are being tested right now, and it's not necessarily insulin, but diabetes patients are among those who are most vulnerable to COVID. So many of these drugs that are being tested are now in shorter supply for the people that need them because people are testing. We know that with malaria drugs. We know the people that are taking those malaria drugs that the president is sort of ballyhooing as kind of a cure-all for the coronavirus and COVID. They're going to be at a shortage pretty soon, and that's scary to a lot of them. So this whole idea of supply and demand is a big part of this as well. It definitely does mean that this price could have come lower long ago, and when this pandemic is over, it should be lower than it was when this started.
Yeah. And to give some historical perspective on the rise in the price, insulin prices spiked nearly 100% between 2012 and 2016, often costing thousands of dollars, even for insured people with high deductible plans. No, that's 2016. We know that it didn't stop then, obviously. The price has continued to rise, and I have never seen presented any sort of feasible reason based in access to materials needed for its construction, relicensing. I haven't seen literally anything that has explained why it's more expensive now than it was a couple of years ago. And to go back even further in history, in 1923, the discoverers of insulin sold its patent for $1, hoping the low price would keep the essential treatment available to everyone who needed it. Reached for comment, those discoverers are spinning rapidly in their graves. Because that was a great plan, but unfortunately, people who are incredibly shady have gotten control over it. And I think it was Shkreli, one of the worst people of the past few years in public life, who I believe that's one of the drugs that he massively increased the price of. So look, it's good that they're doing this. As a skeptic, I'm inclined to believe that perhaps it's a brief PR move, and I wonder how long it'll last. But if you need this, and people have died recently in the past few years because of not having access to the money needed to pay for the ever-increasing price, it shouldn't be happening. And as I think it was Eric Wall pointed out, what's cheaper than 35? Free is cheaper. And for something that you need to sustain your life, especially if you are already paying for your insurance, the idea that you should suffer more financial stress it's not comprehensible to a lot of Americans.
Yeah, and it's different than sort of like the temporary rent relief, right? That you can have landlords not charge rent for 3 months or whatever it is. That's different because those are people that own property that make a living off of this. But when you look at what the drug companies are doing, it's a totally different thing. If they can come down for 3 months, they can certainly come down with some degree of permanence because they have to. It's an obligation, and they're making enough money anyway.
Yeah, and I would just add this to the list of like all of the things that to progressives seemed like solutions that needed to happen before the pandemic. There are things that are starting to happen during the pandemic, or that people are starting to realize during the pandemic. And I hope that once it's done, once you're not in quarantine, you don't have to think about coronavirus, I hope that people don't go back to sleep effectively on this. Like, I think people are realizing some of the fundamental flaws in the way that healthcare is provided and paid for in this country. And it could be solved not just under emergency conditions, but going forward during all of the other emergencies that we don't treat as such.
Yeah,
okay. Oh, sorry. No, continue.
No, I'm saying no question. And that is the crux of all of this. That some of these things have to be enduring.
Yeah. So with that, we don't have too much more time. So I'm gonna skip the slaughterhouse regulations. So we will be getting to those tomorrow with Brett. It'll be great. He'll make jokes about pigs. So why don't we go ahead to our last...
Get into it with Mark Thompson at some point if you have him on.
That's actually a very good... You know what? I haven't had Mark Thompson on since we've done this.
It's not worth having him on doing this, but I'm just saying that, if you're going to do the story, you may as well do it when he's on.
I mean, the case could be made that I could talk to him anyway, even without it. He's a nice guy and all.
I love him.
Yeah. So why don't we launch into our last topic? Today is the first full day without Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary, and barring some big change that could come in a variety of different ways, including the theories that the convention could have some sort of big switch up, it is looking like Joe Biden will be the nominee. The general election will be Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, almost certainly under conditions somewhat similar to today in terms of the coronavirus. It is going to be the issue that shapes the election. And that is something that myself and Emma Vigeland, my guest yesterday, talked about, made us incredibly concerned. I acknowledge that the polling has Joe Biden up right now, at least nationally. But I remember that from 2016. And so I'm incredibly nervous. We are joined by Michael Shore. I'm curious, the people that you're talking to, you have more experience than me in these national elections. How would you rate your confidence that Joe Biden can win in November if he is the nominee?
I mean, first of all, experience is one thing, but the electorate changes and the people that are involved change. So it's difficult to say that just because there's experience. There's certainly things that my perspective has that a lot of people who are much more fully invested in one candidate or another don't have. But to say that it just experience, could not have been more dead wrong about 2016. But I know that was an anomalous election to a degree, and a lot of people were wrong. I've known and I've seen what has appealed to Joe Biden on the campaign trail for the past 15 months. Voters who I've been speaking to with great regularity, talk about electability in a way that is difficult to define. It's a hunch thing. It's the idea that this is the person I believe who has a better chance. My dog barks too. Better chance of beating Donald Trump than that person or that other person. And so I've come to understand, and sorry about the dog, but I've come to understand and agree that enough people think that, and I do too. I mean, I do think that there is an electability thing here with Joe Biden, where he probably has a better chance with the people that he connects with, even though connecting is going to be a difficult thing now. The other advantage Joe Biden has, which any of these candidates would have had, is that this election is a referendum on Donald Trump. It's nothing more right now. It is not about big ideas, as are discussed in your super chats and the TYT audience. And it's a shame in a sense that it's not, but that's just how it shook out this time, is that Americans, by and large, seem to want to get rid of this person, which shows why Joe Biden is up. And these numbers are a little different than 2016 in that this is an incumbent president. And when you are a favorite against an incumbent president, there has not been a lead like this early in a very long time. I think it was since the time of Harry Truman. And I'm not going to hold to that, but I think that's when it last was. So I think there are reasons also to be encouraged about his ability to win. And finally, one of the things that the audience here won't like to hear, and it's not me advocating it or saying it, is that the Democratic Party, a lot of these progressive ideas in an election that was not about issues were kind of set aside this time. And I don't think that I think that the Democrats feel that they are going to appeal to a different kind of voter and don't need as much support from the progressive. But the party itself knows that they need those people going forward when you look at the age disparity. So it will behoove them to invest in those voters now rather than, not because of the 2020 election. I don't think it's as necessary personally, but I do think going forward, they have to do it in a long-term way.
I agree. I do think, and first of all, not everyone agrees with me, but I think that the Democratic Party needs to, both to solve the problems that America faces and also for its own interests, needs to move in a more progressive direction. I desperately want them to do that. I think that that's better for everyone. It is a win-win, and not the third win for the Republican Party. They would lose, but that's one of the benefits. But they don't seem to be doing much to actually do that, which is frustrating. But I want to ask you about a few of the concerns that myself and others have been expressing about a Joe Biden nomination for some time. So let's go, individually through a few of these. One concern I have is that he has seemed very eager recently to effectively distance himself from the election. He wanted Bernie out, which I get. Bernie was running against him. He didn't want to debate him even when he was in. He didn't want to have any more debates. And the reason I talk about that is because we're in a time where coronavirus is overwhelmingly dominating the news cycle. Trump has a national stage every single day to talk. There was already less focus on the Democratic primary. Now that, effectively we're not going to have very competitive, races going forward, and we're not going to have any debates, there's going to be much less focus on Joe Biden. And I don't see anything from Joe Biden that makes me think that he's looking to fill that gap with anything new, anything to draw attention to him. And I feel like you can't beat an incumbent president if you're effectively not even part of the conversation, not really being considered. What do you think about that?
Well, listen, if I were advising Joe Biden, first of all, I thought the "where was Joe" thing was totally overblown. But if I were advising Joe Biden, I'd advise him to do exactly what he's been doing to an extent, because Joe Biden doesn't have a job. Bernie Sanders had a job. He was a senator who was voting on important stimulus, who was taking in the so much of what was being presented by the White House and by the nation. So I think that that's important. So too does Donald Trump have a job that obviously it requires him to be there every day on this. Joe Biden, I think, had he been issuing statements every day and been doing the things that some people wanted him to do, I think it would have looked weak because he could not exact any change upon what was going on. What he's been doing is having this kind of shadow cabinet of people that he's consulting with. People don't know about it. Nobody's paying attention to this race. And a lot of people, again, hard for this audience to digest. For many people, this race has been over since Super Tuesday and certainly over a week after that. So I do think that that's something that people have to take into consideration, is that gear up for the race when you can run that race. You had nothing to gain because you were already going to win the nomination. It was pretty clear where it was going. I think that that's what he should have done. Could he have done things differently? Sure, but I don't think markedly so, and I don't think it would have made a difference in this whole conversation. Going forward, I think that's going to change.
Someone said in the chat that I should plug my op-ed. So if you want more of what I was saying there, the op-ed is available at The Hill. Does Joe Biden really want to be president? You can take a look at that. So I guess
I read your op-ed, John, and A, I think he does, and B, I thought it was well written.
Thank you. And I don't mean that he doesn't have the inclination. I'm saying, is he willing to do what is necessary to win? Like, and as Emma and I talked about yesterday, like, obviously we weren't big fans of Hillary Clinton. It was pretty clear. But nobody ever doubted that she was going to fight. I think that she strategically made some significant errors, could have fought in different ways, certainly. But she definitely wanted it bad. Joe Biden, to me, just seems a bit too relaxed, like a bit too willing to, like to Skype into CNN for 2 minutes and then mostly call it a day. I acknowledge I'm in a bubble. I am biased, but that's my perception.
Well, I think your bubble, I mean, I wouldn't just sort of disclaim it, because there are a lot of people that agree with you. You're not alone with that opinion. But I do, I think that these times and these circumstances right now are like nothing anyone has ever been through. So I think it's all a guess as to whether or not he's doing it right or not doing it right. But I think that the notion is he can't really run for president just yet. He cannot do that. And he has plenty of time to do that, and he will do that. And then I think you will likely see someone who wants to be president. Again, going back to what I said before, the other thing that makes this different is this is a referendum on Donald Trump, this election. It's exactly the election Joe Biden has wanted. And so I think he's prepared to run in this way as just an alternative to Donald Trump for the moment.
Okay, so I have two more concerns I want to raise to you. The first is how Donald Trump is going to run against him. And so we already know what he's saying about, Biden not being able to follow what he sees on TV and stuff like that. So I'm worried that that is just going to be like the narrative. And then the other is that the allegations from Tara Reade, Joe Biden didn't have to answer a single question at a debate about it. I haven't seen him asked about it on CNN or MSNBC, which is obviously what you want if you're Joe Biden. But Trump is going to talk about it on the debate stage. He's going to talk about it in ads. He's going to talk about it literally every day. So at some point, a reckoning is going to have to come with those allegations. My preference would have been that we had that reckoning before he was locked in as the nominee, but it's going to come. How concerned are you about those two potential narratives being injected on a daily basis, including on the debate stage, from Donald Trump?
Well, I mean, the Tara Reade thing, I think, is if you're going to have someone to run against and where that becomes a problem, I think Donald Trump is the right person to talk about it with. I think Donald Trump is going to spend far more time talking about Hunter Biden than Tara Reade, because to him, nobody cares, and certainly he doesn't care about Tara Reade. I think that he's going to go full bore on Hunter Biden. I think, he's going to go full socialist too, even though as we sit here, and especially this audience in this space knows that Joe Biden is in a socialist, whoever the nominee was is going to be painted as a socialist by the other side. And I think those are going to be what you're going to hear in the narrative from Donald Trump most. And then also as a way of dividing the Democratic Party, which would be strategically, if I were advising Donald Trump what to do, is to try and divide the party as much as I could, rather than go to those sort of sexy images, both literally and figuratively. And then the first part of that, I think that if you look at Joe Biden and how you engage him, I do think that when it comes to two older white men engaging each other in politics, Joe Biden is going to be tougher. He's going to be more pugnacious in a way. He's not going to laugh at, he'll laugh it off because he laughs a lot off in show, but he's not going to laugh off a lot of what's being said. And he has a different audience now. These suburban voters who like Joe Biden in states that both are red and blue are going to come to his defense in ways that they would not have for Hillary Clinton. What Joe Biden, even for the people that don't like Joe Biden, Democrats, people in our super chat right here who don't like Joe Biden is liked. And Hillary Clinton was not. And that is a big difference between 2016 and 2020, is that people came in with a visceral dislike of Hillary Clinton that doesn't exist as much or nearly as much with Joe Biden, and that's what makes it a little difficult for Joe Biden. Has made it in the primaries very difficult for him. Nobody's ever said bad things to Joe Biden about Joe Biden in almost a half-century career in politics. It took him a while to get used to it. It's why he was so shocked when Kamala Harris said what she did at the Miami debate. It's why he will not be as shocked when he hears Donald Trump say those things.
One more question. So I think I know what you're going to say based on your other answers, but I assume you are not of the camp that believes that he's going to be pulled and replaced at the convention by Cuomo or whoever.
I don't. I really don't think so. I think that first of all, Black Americans who came out in droves in the South and across the country in the primaries for Joe Biden would be really upset with their party and wouldn't allow it to happen. I think on a technical level, and there doesn't seem to be any reason for it to happen. I mean, barring a major misstep, barring something that we don't know about the nominee right now, and Joe Biden's been pretty vetted over 50 years. I just think that I don't see that, or nearly 50 years. I don't see that as happening. I don't think the convention wants it, and I don't think it's the place for it to happen. Also, the convention now happens late in August, just before the Republican convention. The Democrats do not want to seem in disarray a week before the Republicans go out there and talk about disarray. So I think there's a 1% chance. Top.
You should debate that with Cenk because he seems pretty convinced.
Well, debate with Cenk all the time, and Cenk's right a lot, but Cenk's also wrong a lot.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. In any event, thank you for joining us not only for that conversation but for the entire show. I saw a lot of really positive messages about you in the chat, including one that just said great to get Michael's perspective on this. So thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Johnny. Thanks everybody.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Bye.
Okay, everybody. We are going to go through some of your super chats. Luis says, my grandma died from COVID-19. She was diabetic and had high blood pressure, but stayed 2 days hooked to a ventilator. My Bolsonarist uncle thinks, as Fox News, that it was her previous conditions. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like when Bill O'Reilly was saying what he was saying, like he's talking about numbers, but each one of those numbers is an individual person. He ignores that. Like he is completely immune to the acknowledgement, the stimulating any empathy whatsoever. And sorry for your loss. Luck Dragon says, crazy thing about socialism, military is the largest socialist program in the world. 100%, yes. Zane says, extremely freaking racist and disgusting, referencing the ad from Paul Brown. Luck Dragon says, a Romulan and Packled couple have a child, but it's raised by a failed Ferengi con man. Who am I talking about? That's funny. Army of One says, hey John, seen Tales from the Loop? It's so good. So Army, thank you for bringing up Tales from the Loop. In LA, there are a million billboards for Tales from the Loop. I do plan on watching it at some point. I am familiar with the role-playing game and the art that it's based on, which I am a fan of in terms of the art, but not really a fan of the role-playing game. But anyway, the trailer didn't really hook me, but I love the concept, so I probably will watch it at some point. StrayX says, geez, John had to bring us back down, reminding us about Bernie's campaign suspension. On the brighter note, High Score Girls Season 2 is out on Netflix. I'm not familiar with that, but I will look into it. And yeah, I was talking with my friend Shavala, and she said yesterday was one of the worst days that she can remember. And yes. Zane says, fix that internet, Michael. Your internet mutes you. Yeah, it was worse before we went live. He was able to make it work a little bit better, but it's just, in some areas, it's difficult. A lot of people are on the internet. Valerie says, Bernie was my guy. Now Bernie is out. I'm going to blow my nose, shake my shoulders, and say I'm all in for Biden. I'll do what I can to move him left, but I'm determined to vote blue no matter who. Thank you, Valerie. And look, our audience, obviously, that is one thing that there's going to be a lot of disagreement on, and we're going to see what happens. Unprecedented Madness says, Devin Pandy is running in that primary. Well, thank you for letting us know that. Amanda says, who spells brown like that? Yeah. Maybe it was originally Braun, but he said brown. I listened in the ad. Nichols says, there are already shortages happening for hydroxychloroquine for lupus and rheumatic patients. I have lupus and take it, and worried I won't get it this month. There are a lot of people in my lupus support group that have had problems too. Yeah, and that's the thing that I don't know that I've ever heard Trump acknowledge that getting people to do a rush on hydroxychloroquine is going to not only potentially endanger the lives of the people that they're going to be testing it on, but also the people who need it for other things. Catmando says, John loves leap years when he has 366 birthdays. This is on hashtag TDR Live. Yeah, exactly. And Nicole says, "Are you kidding me, John? Hillary still wants it. I really wouldn't be surprised if she wasn't behind the curtain instead of some old short man." Look, I'm assuming at this point that there's no path where she comes roaring back in. She's not going to replace him at the convention. I mean, anything could happen. I guess we live in crazy times. But I'm going to assume that that is not going to happen at this point. Zane says, bye-bye, everyone. Great show, Johnny Pie. Thank you so much, Zane, and for your multiple super chats. Everyone who took part in the conversation, whether through a comment or super chat or hashtag TDR Live, and follows either myself at John Iadarola or The Damage Report at The Damage Report. Really do appreciate that. By the way, if you haven't been checking the channel, youtube.com/The Damage Report for the new uploads, we had an interview with an awesome candidate, former Andrew Yang staffer. That's up. There'll be more from him later on this weekend. More interviews going up all the time. And by the way, tomorrow, one of the most fun things we do every week is the Friday show with Brett Ehrlich. We're going to have a new top 10 list for you. You can submit ideas for that at hashtag TDR Live and tweeting at The Damage Report. We're also going to have our garbage people of the week. So hopefully, following a really rough week, we're going to definitely have some fun. So, plan for that. And I'll see you then. Stay safe out there.